Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Sidharth Bhatia. When UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan made a quick 3 hour visit to New Delhi a few days ago, speculation was rife what it was for. Though a joint statement was issued at the end of the visit outlining what was discussed, among them a proposed defense deal, the speculation continued. One of the possible thoughts that most people were discussing was that the Abu Dhabi ruler had come looking for support in the ongoing dispute with Saudi Arabia. Reports suggest that the bigger country, Saudi Arabia, is unhappy with the Emirates, which is composed of seven smaller countries, over several issues, chief among them being their role in Yemen, where a violent conflict has been raging for years. Saudi Arabian media has been targeting the Emirates for supporting the separatists. There's also been media criticism against the Emirates for supporting secessionists in African countries. A crisis in the Gulf, if it comes, would be a global problem, but would definitely affect India badly. It is not known what India's position on the issue is. India has good, strong relations with both, as well as a substantial Indian population of workers in both the countries. To explain to us what exactly is happening and to analyze India's options, I invited Talmiz Ahmed, an acknowledged expert on the region. Ahmad has been India's ambassador in both the Emirates and in Saudi Arabia, as well as in Oman, and writes regularly on Gulf matters. He is an experienced retired diplomat, having lived in South Africa, Britain, and the United States, among other countries. Talmiz Ahmed, welcome to the Wire Talks.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. Good to be here.
What do you make of the quick visit of the Emirati president to India?
The visit of the president of the UAE and ruler of Abu Dhabi is part of the strategic partnership that India has with the UAE. In most relationships, this strategic partnership is given lip service. But in the case of the UAE, it has genuinely been realized. We have built very substantial political, security, economic ties with each other. Our leaders have met several times with each other. We have consulted very regularly on issues of common interest. The political aspects of our discussions have not always found a place in the public domain. But in the economic side, it's very clear that we not only have we have a very strong agreement which boosts our trade ties and is taking us into new heights. We also have very important investment relationship. What he would have come to discuss with India would be the situation in the region. Post after the Gulf, after the end of the Gaza war, there is a temporary lull in violence. Various countries in the region are now looking to see how to manage the consequences of this horrendous event. The war had encompassed almost all the major countries of West Asia. There was even an attack not only on Iran, there was an attack on Doha as well in this situation. And various countries are now constantly talking to each other to see how we can shape an alternative scenario that would support their own interest. So I think that would be the crucial aspect. Specifically, from his side, he would have explained to the Prime Minister the divide that has now emerged between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. We would have raised concerns about the role of Pakistan. During Operation Sindoor itself, it was very clear that Pakistan has built close ties with Turkey. And now we know, we also saw in September, after the attack on Doha, that Saudi Arabia and Pakistan entered into a defense partnership as well. And now Turkey has announced that it wants to enter into this agreement so that there is a trilateral format that is available in the region. All of these are matters of concern for India as well. We would also, in a over a broader over a longer term, we would also have concerns relating to maritime security. UAE has been very active, both in Yemen as well as in the Bab al Mandeb and the Horn of Africa, and obviously that has implications for Red Sea security, and we would have talked about those issues as well.
So the defense agreement signed between the two countries, or the announcement, therefore becomes very significant, right?
Well, we don't normally defense agreements. We are only informed about the title and a very broad outline. My own sense is that the defense agreement is focused largely on defense industry. That means we want to give substance to earlier agreements where we have agreed to manufacture defense related equipment. Whether now we are moving into something more lethal remains to be seen. Earlier, there was conversation relating to electronics, technology, etc. But now it's very difficult to know exactly which areas are being promoted on both sides. I'm not sure it is about weapons at this stage, but it could easily be. We don't know. The fact that we are talking about defense and security matters is a very important, because because the situation in the region is so turbulent, so uncertain, so unpredictable, that conversation between two major countries which have shared interests and concerns becomes extremely important in itself. And I think that is what we have achieved.
The Pakistan Saudi Arabian defense agreement is a very significant one, in which I think they've suggested an attack on one is the attack on the other, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, and you suggested that this spells perhaps India is watching it very, very closely. Does that mean that India and UAE will form some sort of informal grouping in this matter?
I doubt it. India's approach to the Gulf, as I have said many times, is bilateral and transactional. This means that we have very substantial ties with each country of the region individually. And therefore, every country we have a strategic partnership agreement. We have also built very substantial energy related ties. We have very large communities located there. We have good trade relations with each other, and we also have investments with each other. In fact, the UAE is our number one trade partner, but obviously Saudi Arabia is the principal supplier of petroleum to India. So I don't think India is in a position to or interested in choosing between any of these countries. Each and every country of the Gulf is important to India. And therefore, India also has shied away from getting involved with regional issues of security related issues, or issues that call for promotion of stability, etc. India has kept away from that, and believes that these issues are best handled within the region itself rather than by outside players.
But surely, again, to bring up that point, Pakistan joining Saudi Arabia and Turkey showing an interest in this part of the world, that should worry us, no?
Well, it is a matter that we should be constantly scrutinizing. Pakistan is the go to partner for the kingdom whenever it senses a threat to its security. This is built on the very close ties they had with each other all through the Cold War. The Americans had brought them together. The Americans provided weaponry to the Saudis, and the same weaponry was given to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. Therefore, Pakistani soldiers and Pakistani servicemen were involved with training, particularly as pilots, maintenance of aircraft, etc. With regard in Saudi Arabia, unlike other countries, Pakistani troops were actually located in the kingdom from 1968 to 88. For 20 years, about 25,000 people were located. They left in 1988, but again in 1991, when there was a war with Iraq, Pakistani troops were located at the Iraq border in case Iraqi troops had come across the border. Once again in 2010, when there was a war, a conflict between the Houthis and the Saudi armed forces, and several of the latter were killed. Pakistani troops were deployed initially at battalion level, but that has since expanded to brigade, and there could even be a division at the Yemen border. Pakistan, therefore, has constantly been invoked as far as the Saudis are concerned. And this is a very strict. Now, what the Saudi approach is very clear, that they also separate their ties with India from the ties with Pakistan. As far as India is concerned, our ties are energy based, investment, joint ventures, presence of our community, etc. With Pakistan, it is largely a security role. The Saudis see no contradiction here. The Pakistanis play a certain role as far as Saudi interests are concerned. India plays a completely different role in this regard. India is not interested in providing security across its borders, and Pakistan is, and therefore that is where they excel, and we are not in the picture at all. I have personally never seen in this a threat to India, because Pakistan's principal role is to provide security to Saudi Arabia. Even if in the public statement it was written that one would support the other, I do not envisage any scenario in which Saudi troops would be at the Indian border supporting Pakistan. I don't believe that is to be the case. Now, the issue that what changes the regional scenario quite significantly is the entry of Turkey. Turkey has merely stated that it would like to be a part of this bilateral agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. I do not believe this has gone forward just yet. Turkey has had its own traditional differences with the Saudis. I personally feel that Turkey is anxious to be present all across the region. It has its own interests and agenda. It wants to be seen as a very significant player in West Asian affairs, but it's going through cautiously. Its primary concerns today are in Syria and in Iraq, as well as in the East Mediterranean. It also is talking about a civilizational connectivity across Central Asia. With regard to Pakistan, their content is little more strategic. Before and during Operation Sindoor, we saw a military relationship between the two countries. This reminds us of the ties that had united Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan during the Cold War, before the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and that is Pakistan has been part of that. So Pakistan has a traditional relationship with Turkey. It is overwhelmingly a military relationship. But during Operation Sindoor, we were able to see that this relationship is now being revived, refreshed, rejuvenated, and I suspect that we could see a larger Turkish role in our neighborhood than we have seen before.
Oh, that's really, I mean, I've heard you say that in the past, but now you're saying it with far more emphasis, I feel. But we'll move on. What exactly is the current conflict between Saudi Arabia and Emirates?
This is a problem within the family. And as we know, fratricidal competitions and conflicts tend to be quite lethal. Here, what has I'm going to be cautious here because it's not much in the public domain, and it would not be appropriate to make aggressive remarks in this regard. But let me put it like this: reading the literature from Saudi Arabia, we obtain a very long narrative of Saudi grievances with regard to UAE conduct. The literature speaks of the UAE coming into the Yemen conflict as part of the coalition put together by Saudi Arabia, and then abruptly withdrawing its troops in 2019 without consulting the other coalition partners. Secondly, they point out that the UAE, while withdrawing from the conflict in Yemen, became active in supporting secessionist elements in South Yemen. Now, during the war, the Saudis found that their interests were shrugged off. Saudis were bearing the brunt of the fight against the Houthis, while the Emiratis were building relations in South Yemen, establishing control over ports in that area, and pursuing an agenda that had nothing to do with the Yemen conflict. And Yemen was also, Saudi Arabia was also particularly worried about the secession. Because if you have a breakaway entity in South Yemen, it could become the bastion for elements that might, over a period of time, become hostile to Saudi Arabia. They were worried about that. And Saudi Arabia has a very long, porous 1400-kilometer border with Yemen. UAE, on the other hand, is quite far away across on the Gulf. Therefore, what the consequences of Emirati action in Yemen would have harmed Saudi interests. So that would have been the first issue. But this had been going on for some time. What is puzzling is that it is only in late 2025 that the Saudis suddenly showed annoyance. Actually, the Emirati activity, maritime related activity in taking control of the ports of Yemen, particularly in the south of Hoka, Mocha, Aden, Mukalla, etc., has been going on for some time. But then again, very significantly, it appears from published sources that the islands of Socotra in the Gulf of Aden and the Perim Island, also called Mayun, Perim Island at the mouth of the Bab al Mandeb is under UAE control. We also know that the UAE over the last few years has established bases, commercial and or military, in the Horn of Africa. It is particularly well placed in Berbera in Somaliland, and it has built very close ties with Ethiopia. Therefore, it is a very well established presence all across this in the Gulf of Aden, in Yemen itself, the Gulf of Aden, and the two islands that belong to Yemen, as well as in the Horn of Africa. Now, suddenly, what you find, what the Saudis talked about, following on 25th December, Israel announced that it was recognizing Somaliland. The view all across the Horn of Africa is that it is the Emiratis that encouraged the Israelis to participate in this activity. This is something which is very dangerous. Saudi Arabia has a very long coastline on the Red Sea. Till now, until the Israeli initiative, Israel was locked up at Eilat, which is a small presence at the mouth of at the Gulf of Aqaba that moves into the Red Sea. Suddenly, you find Israel is going to be all over the place in Somaliland, and that is very worrying. We also have read reports that Israelis are present in Socotra. So, what would be read in Riyadh would be the conclusion that that UAE is making up for its small size and limited military capacity by aligning itself with Israel and encouraging the presence of Israel in territories that would finally they are very close to Saudi Arabia, and an Israeli presence would change the security scenario in the region to Saudi disadvantage. So what the Saudis did on 28th December was to bomb the military supplies. That there was an Emirati ship that had come up to the port of Mukalla, and several truck loads of weapons were being unloaded. The Saudi Air Force attacked the trucks and destroyed the weaponry. And Saudi Arabia has now become active in South Yemen. It has demanded that the Southern Transition Council, which had led the secession up to now, should be broken up and cease to exist. The leader of that council is believed to have fled and gone to Abu Dhabi for refuge. The Emiratis had also apparently created certain brigades military brigades, which are quite lethal. Saudi Arabia has demanded that they should be disbanded. So now it remains to be seen how active the kingdom will be in this regard, how far it will be able to go. After all, the war in Yemen has been going on for 10 years. There has been a stalemate for a very long time, albeit there is a ceasefire, but there is still a stalemate. What will be UAE's role in response to this Saudi aggressiveness remains to be seen. So there are certain uncertainties. How far has UAE gone with regard to ties with Israel? Has it really brought the Israelis into the heart of a very sensitive and insecure region like the Gulf of Aden and the Horn of Africa? It remains to be seen. Literature in Saudi Arabia, I'm sorry to say, is very hostile to UAE and is harsh and critical with regard to some of the actions of the Emiratis.
Now, these two countries, the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and the leaders themselves, uh, were quite close till 10 years ago. Not till 10 years, but 10 years ago, certainly. And suddenly, when you say literature is hostile and you explain this so well, it seems to have escalated. Couldn't this have been done behind the scenes in a kind of brotherly way, sat down somewhere and
You're absolutely right to ask that. And this would have been the first thought. My understanding would be as follows. There was a lot of writing 10 years ago when Prince Mohammed bin Salman had come onto the Saudi scene, and very quickly, within 2 years, he was the crown prince and had elbowed out senior royal family members. He had become the effective head of the country, and at some stage, he also became the prime minister. I think after the first year or so, the kind of camaraderie that had been on public display between then Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and Prince Mohammed bin Salman, I think already was moving away. It was diluting. When I had talked to some Saudis at that time, they had said, look, look at the map. Saudi Arabia looms large all across the region. It dominates the region. No Saudi ruler is going to subordinate himself to another leader in the neighborhood in the Gulf Cooperation Council. It doesn't happen. Saudi Arabia sees itself as not a first among equals. It sees itself as the leader of the GCC. And now, more recently, it sees itself as the leader of the Arab world. And of course, it doesn't talk about it very much, but it is understood that it is a leader of the Islamic world as well. So, this camaraderie that you are talking about had already started getting diluted. I think there were a lot of consultations between the two rulers over a long period of time. I recall that when the Emiratis withdrew from Yemen in 2019, rather than allow public differences to come into the public domain, rather than allow differences to come into the public domain, they set up a joint committee for consultation at the apex level. I'm not sure that committee ever met. It seems to me, and if I put a date, it would be roughly around 2020, 2021, that UAE made it clear that it would pursue an independent policy approach in the region. And we saw the UAE getting more and more active with regard to the management and control over ports all across from the Gulf of Oman right up to the Gulf of Aden and beyond that into the Horn of Africa. We saw that already happening. This is not officially talked about. If you were to go to the internet and look for government of UAE statements on the subject, you will not see any remark from an official source confirming the UAE agenda in controlling these ports. However, if you just see the literature in the internet, very diverse literature from Arab, Western, and Horn of Africa sources, you will find thousands, hundreds of documents talking about the Emirati presence in the various ports. Now you start reflecting. There is no official statement, mind you, with regard to why the Emirates is doing what it is doing. The idea that has come out, and this is speculation, that the UAE wants to control the maritime space from Jabal Ali, its port in the Gulf, right across to Fujairah, its port on the Indian Ocean, coming south, Socotra, Gulf of Aden through the ports of Yemen, Mukalla, Aden, Khoka, and Mocha, and the ports in like Barbara in Somaliland. This is its agenda. UAE has also built substantial ties with Ethiopia, and in January 2024, Ethiopia entered into an agreement with Somaliland. Now, I should clarify to you, Somaliland is not an independent country. It is formally a province of Somalia. However, from 1991, it has had its own president and its own national assembly. But not a single country in the world till recently recognized Somaliland's independence until the Israelis came into the picture. Hence, but UAE was a strong presence in Somaliland. It was developing Berbera port with $450 million. The agreement that Ethiopia has signed with Somaliland is to have logistical connectivity, road and railway connectivity between Addis Ababa and Berbera. So these are very significant developments. It indicates an extraordinarily ambitious approach in the region from a country that otherwise is a very small country with limited strategic value, but at the same time, a massive outreach in all the strategic areas that are important for global commerce. After all, UAE would now become a major presence at the Bab al Mandeb and controlling the flow of goods into the Red Sea. So this is something that has been watched with some degree of concern. Some writers have speculated that the UAE may not have done all this on its own, that possibly it has tacit American support. The UAE also is one of the countries that has normalized ties with Israel, and abruptly you see Israel present in Somaliland. Somaliland has a very long coastline in the Gulf of Aden, yeah, and on the Indian Ocean as well. Therefore, it has very great strategic value. So, for the UAE action is seen with great concern, not just by Saudi Arabia, but I may add most other countries in the region, including Egypt, which also has a presence on the Red Sea as well as in the East Mediterranean.
So, given that Saudi Arabia sees itself as, I mean, more than the big brother, and the UAE is at the end of the day a small country in that region and is showing tremendous ambition, do you think that there is any possibility that this conflict, if I may call it, will escalate?
I think both sides will make every attempt to control the flow of ill will and discord. At some stage, there will be mutual accommodation, much deeper conversation, and mutual accommodation. Recall here the divide within the GCC in relation to Qatar. For 2.5 years, you had Qatar being blockaded. It suffered political, diplomatic, and economic and logistical blockade, and it had a very hard time over those 2 years. At some stage, the brotherly interests brotherly relations triumphed, and they were able to accommodate, they were able to remove that overnight and bring Qatar back into the GCC fold. These kind of divisions, discord within the GCC have taken place very, very frequently, and but they have been sorted out between the royal family members. This is a rare occasion where a particular country has pursued its strategic interests, a very ambitious strategic interest, so openly, so successfully, and without consulting its other members, and has allowed such a situation to come when there is actual bombing of its assets in Mukalla.
How would India be watching all this? Of course, with some amount of concern and very closely. But how would India be watching? Would India play a role, or would India say, "Let them sort it out"? And but we don't want it to escalate one way or the other.
India, as I
I
had
mean, what
said
are
earlier,
India's options?
yeah, India, as I had said earlier, has pursued for the last 40 or 50 years the policy of not getting involved in the security disputes that are rampant in West Asia. Its approach, I have used this term many times, its approach is bilateral and transactional. It has substantial ties with all the countries individually. Each of these ties brings a lot of value to both sides. And that is what India would like to maintain. I don't think India has even minimal interest in getting involved with what is happening. India would instruct its ambassadors to keep itself informed about various developments. Every time the ambassador would go to the foreign office, he would get a briefing on the subject, which he would report. But I do not envisage any scenario in which India would get involved. I would also add that disputes within the GCC cannot be addressed by outsiders. I remember that when Prince Mohammed bin Salman was going to the United States recently, in the Western media there were reports that he would, among other items, seek Trump's intervention to restrain the UAE in terms of its policies in South Yemen. So that had already come. And it felt very strange that a GCC member should have to go all the way to Washington to plead with an American president known to be unpredictable and erratic to caution UAE. I don't think anything came of that because the hit that the Saudis took up on the military supplies at Mukalla indicates that the Americans, I think, decided not to get involved. This led to some speculation that whatever the Emiratis might be doing in the region possibly has American blessings. I doubt that very much. I'm not sure about how focused the Americans are in regard to this area. In any case, it has been going on for a long time. Donald Trump has not shown his ability to focus on specific issues far away, particularly those that don't immediately impinge on his interest. Israel, on the other hand, at a time when there is so much discord within the region, it is quite likely Israel seized a certain opportunity for itself and saw that why not expand our strategic outreach and reach up to Somaliland and play some mischief. Some of the people I spoke to in Egypt mentioned to me that Israel doesn't have a long term strategic vision or value. It doesn't look at issues over a long term. But we don't know, and we have some way to go as to whether it's actually what are the strategic implications of what the Israelis have done. In the Horn of Africa, this topic is being discussed in great detail because it will be a very destabilizing development if a sovereign country is broken up and one entity secedes as a result of intervention from outsiders. It is a very dangerous development in a very fragile area where all the borders are under dispute. In the Horn of Africa, the reason we refer to it as fragile and insecure is because every country has issues that are domestic, divisions that are domestic, and has issues with its neighbor. It would be very dangerous for such a country, for such a region, to have one country broken up. I'm not talking about the merits of Somaliland becoming independent. It is the way in which it is being done. If Somaliland secedes as a result of consensus within Somalia, as a result of a referendum sanctioned by the by the I mean sanctioned by the central government, that's a different matter. That is how South Sudan came into the picture. But the Horn of Africa has seen every secession that has happened so far, whether it is the separation of Eritrea from Ethiopia in 1991 or the separation of South Sudan from Sudan, both of them have caused extraordinary havoc, and there has never been peace in the region despite the separation. So, secession has not been the cause of peace, it is the cause of discord and war.
So, are you suggesting that Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, the other Gulf countries will see this closely and say whatever we have to do for the future, for the next few steps, should be done mutually and maybe with a great amount of positivity, great amount of optimism, rather than continue to escalating this
I don't
crisis?
think anyone wants to escalate matters. But at the same time, terms like mutual goodwill, etc., are not on the horizon. They have not been mentioned by anybody. I think this is wait and see, is what is happening. I am sure that behind the scenes, there is a lot of movement taking place. Emissaries are going back and forth. The rulers may be sulking, but the emissaries are going back and forth just to see where you can draw the line, where you can have some degree of face saving formula that will please both sides. The Emirates, I think, has gone with its eyes wide open. It has gone where it. Some literature, I'm sorry to say to you, and it pains me to repeat some words, that a particular article written by a well known scholar, by scholar of Palestine, has accused the UAE of being Israel's Trojan horse in the Arab world. He wrote this article in Al Jazeera. That article has since been withdrawn and you cannot access it. But it was there. Shibli Telhami is a very well known scholar globally on matters relating to Palestine. Obviously, he sees the UAE role first normalizing ties with Israel and then Israel coming into Somaliland as actions that are hostile to Arab interests and therefore to Palestinian interests as well.
That's a strong statement to say Trojan horse. So I don't know whether that will be the starting point or whether that will be discarded. But clearly, as you said, emissaries are going back and forth. So maybe some developments will take place. We
We will have
really
to.
don't know because this level of crisis in the Gulf has not happened for a while, wouldn't you say?
Well, I
Between
told
two
you the other
countries,
crisis was there with us from 2017 to 2020.
but it
It
was
was quite
sorted.
serious. But there was no military action taken. Here there is
Yeah.
military action, albeit not on UAE, on its proxy elements at Mukalla, but the signal is very clear that the kingdom is willing to use military force in defense of its national interest. I don't think it will attack any Gulf target, any GCC target, but any proxy that comes in the way, the kingdom will take initiative. Now, but I don't even know one more thing. Has the damage been done? If the Israelis are now deep inside Somaliland, they are not going anywhere.
Hmm.
They are there. They are not going to go anywhere. And therefore, it's quite likely that you are going to see a very untidy security scenario in an extremely fragile area. From my recent visit to Addis Ababa, I have come back with a huge quantity of literature commenting on Israel's recognition of Somaliland, and there is some people are celebrating it. Some people are quite happy. For example, in Ethiopia, any weakening of Somalia is deemed to be a good thing because Somalia is also has got is accommodates a Shabab, which is a Muslim Islamic extremist entity. It has done havoc in the region. It has attacked targets in Kenya. It has also attacked on one occasion targets in Ethiopia. Therefore, if it weakens Somalia, but these are short-term palliatives. The fact is that they all of them taken together contribute to making the region even more fragile, even more insecure, more unstable, and all of that encourages conflict.
Well, that is, I don't want to sum it up by saying optimistic or pessimistic, but it bears watching closely. Uh, we are, of course, also interested in what it means for India, which also you have explained very well. So, thank you, Talmiz Ahmed, for this masterly thesis on an analysis on a very, very may become very, very volatile region. I hope not. Thank you so much. That was Talmiz Ahmed, a very senior diplomat and former diplomat and the acknowledged expert in India on matters of the Gulf. We'll be back next week once again with another guest on the Wire Talks. Till then, from me and the rest of the team, goodbye.